You're on.
Right. So this is Dream Theater World interviewing Jordan for all the fans. The fans have posted a lot of questions, and we want to ask them to you. We've asked questions over at the Dream Theater World Facebook page. We asked questions at the Dream Theater forums, and also at the Dream Theater subreddit. So there's people from all kinds of different places.
Right, right.
So let's just start. There's people asking what happened to the solo concerts that were kind of announced and then fell apart, like France and Norway and stuff.
Yeah, sadly, they didn't work out. It's funny. The more I do this, the more I realize what a crazy game, if you will, it is booking shows. I mean, there's so many parameters. You have to deal with so many things. And it's not as straight ahead as most people really think. So, it has to do with things like promoters and, venues and travel schedule and I don't know, a million things. And unfortunately, sometimes it doesn't work out the way we want. I mean, for me personally, I'm like, why aren't I playing in Norway? It's a great place for me to play. But then all these other, things kind of can get in the way, and in this case did. So, and one of the things is that this is my first time really out doing this.
Right.
And, maybe it's hard for people to understand that, but it's what it is, to go out and travel Europe as a solo artist. Even though it feels like it makes sense, and maybe I should have done it before, it is the first time. So it makes it a little bit more complicated in that way too.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, I want to play these good places that make sense for me. I don't want to be stuck in a room that doesn't, have a really great piano, for example, or things like that. So, yeah.
So Sandy Ferrari asks, what do you love most, composing, improvisational playing, or performing, solo or with the band?
Oh, what do I love most? Um, there's so many interests that I have musically, and each one satisfies me in a different way. Like for me to sit at the piano and just improvise can be, for me, the magic of that can be almost like a personal, like healing kind of experience. Like if I sit here and I start going, I mean, I have an easier time kind of like expressing my mood. It's like talking for me. I just
Right.
play, and it doesn't have to be anything you've ever heard before, but it's a way of expressing. So that's a very comfortable kind of thing for me. But if I'm playing like in Dream Theater, that's like can be really like a rush or amazing because we have these compositions with the band, and it's a lot of energy. So it's a very big difference between this kind of approach, just vibing. And different people like different things, vibing like that, or being kind of like the rocker guy and playing cool riffs and the synthesizer and da 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 da. It's a different headspace, so it has different purposes in my life.
Right. So there's this guy called Diego Ceracero who asks, how many notes can you play per second?
How many was that?
Yeah, many.
Oh, wait, I can do that.
Right.
That's mode.
So this Mirror Mask asks, the Astonishing's nature gave you more liberties with song structures, seamlessly incorporating crazy jazz sections at the end of 3 days. Wrote the shortest song played by the full band. And did you like creating songs with such unusual structures? And would you contemplate to be more daring and off the beaten path with song structures like that for the next record?
Those song structures were really the music to The Astonishing was all about making music that would support the story. That's what happens basically when you're, um, trying to achieve something like that. I mean, there might be a particular part of the story that's really, really short, where all you need is a couple of chords and it tells the story, and then it goes away and it starts something else. So it wasn't this, the Astonishing wasn't so much about creating all, like, songs. It was more about, this kind of like wavy kind of thing where you're telling the story. That's what we tried to do. I know that for some people, especially if they don't understand what's going on, it makes it maybe a little harder to listen to. I remember hearing, one of my favorite artists, Stephen Wilson's concept album, Hand Cannot Erase, and I love everything he does. But when I first heard that, I was like, what's going on? Why does it keep starting and stopping? And then I realized, oh, it's a story. It's not about just songs. It's really a concept thing going on here. So it was a different beast. That's just what it is. That's what the Astonishing was. But it was totally enjoyable. I mean, writing, it was very much like doing a film score or something like that, which is something that I'm very interested in as well.
Right. So Ole Oberlander asks, why do especially people in India love your apps and music so much?
Why do they love the apps and music? That's a good question. I should get my iPad. Why do the people in India love this app so much? I'll give you an example. So one of the reasons they love it is because GeoShred, which of course looks like this, the newest one, allows this very intelligent kind of pitch bending. The pitch bending in like Carnatic music, for example, is very advanced. They don't even really think of like what we know as vibrato, as real vibrato, although they're constantly moving the pitch. And GeoShred allows you to slide on its surface like really like nothing else. So you can be like, that doesn't even make a sound. Here we go. So what's happening, the reason it sounds cool is because whenever I hit any particular spot here, which is a single note, it's going to be in tune right when my finger lands on it. And when I move to another point and stop my finger, it's going to automatically kind of what I call round to the correct pitch. So even though the slides get very like advanced, it always sounds good. So it's a perfect instrument for people like who are doing Carnatic music in India. It's a perfect instrument for so many people around the world that are doing this kind of music that involves advanced kind of pitch changes. And there's many. For some reason, it's been a little easier to get our instrument in the hands of the Indian musicians. But I imagine over time it'll also be discovered by all parts of the globe that are making music that involves more advanced pitch bending.
Yeah. Engevigen asks, as a software developer, or rather, would you consider making a plugin VST instrument?
Oh, absolutely. We're planning on that. Matter of fact, right now, one of the things we're working on is making GeoShred available as an AU3, it's called. So it'll work in more ways, like in iOS. It can be run inside of GarageBand. Right now, it's an audio unit, so you can use it inside of GarageBand. But Apple would like us to make it an AU3, and I think it would make it even more kind of like, larger and make the use a little bit more, continue to make it a little bit more friendly in all applications.
Cool. Yeah. Don't rely on no one else asks, I know you're a fan of technological innovations in music and that you always like to try to include interesting new ways of playing music, from the continuum to the keyboard to the arpeggio to the iPad. What kinds of new instruments or innovations have you not got around to using but would potentially like to use in the future?
What have I not gotten around to use? I mean, there's definitely not enough time in the day to do everything, but I've tried so many interesting instruments. I haven't spent as much time in the VR space as I want to, although I've tried some instruments in that space. There was a really great one that some friends of mine were developing called the Music Room, which what they were saying would have 8 dimensions of touch, although I don't know what you're really touching in VR, but the idea was it would have 8 dimensions of interaction. So you could go vertically, you could go through beams that you saw in the VR space. You could turn, if you had like a virtual reality laser harp, you could turn your hand.
Right.
So, I started to experiment with some of that, but certainly more time is needed to get more into it.
So Powder Bones asks, at what point did you know that you had a gift with music? Or would you say you weren't naturally talented, but instead had an extreme desire or interest to learn or practice from the beginning?
That's funny. Well, as the story goes, and this is the story that I kind of tell on my From Bacharach Tour.
Right.
I started playing the piano when I was 7 years old, and the way that it happened was that my second grade teacher, I should do it like I do in the concerts I start playing. It all started with a call from my second grade teacher to my mother that I was playing the piano. Jordan was playing the piano so beautifully in the classroom. To my mother, it was a great shock because I'd never seen a piano before. She thought that the teacher called up the wrong parent because she couldn't believe that I was playing the piano since there was really no music in my family. So a week later, there was a baby grand, what's called an Esty, white piano in my house, and I started taking lessons. So really, it was a funny thing because I was attracted to the piano, but we hadn't had one in the house, so it was a real surprise to the family. But I think that I had, kind of natural attraction and ability to hear music and feel it. So yeah, it was definitely not something that just, I think there was some natural talent there. I hope so.
So Papa Crep asks, hardest DT song to play?
The hardest one to play. There's ones that definitely have challenges, certainly. I think that one of the harder ones is like a Dance of Eternity or something like that that's all instrumental. It's not, easy. There's certainly parts that are really, really a bitch. Like even things like in A Gift of Music at the end where I'm playing like these two, parts at once is really hard. But in general, if I'm playing something like a Liszt Hungarian Rhapsody, it's going to be harder.
Right.
Just because of the nature of it, it's got to be the piano that just carries the whole thing, and it could be very, very technical.
So Cryptospore asks, do you ever make a mistake? How often do you go whole performance without making a mistake, or at least one that's noticeable?
I made one. I can make one when I'm sitting and practicing. Like a lot of the passages that I was telling you about, like the Chopin one. It's hard to play that without a mistake, so I'll play it slowly. And when I speed it up, it's sometimes not perfect because it's just so hard. But I keep working on it.
Right. Samsara asks, keyboardists in rock and metal acts are typically either players that fancy themselves a lead player or somebody who focus mostly on atmosphere. Of course, there's crossover there, but when did you know you'd want to be more of a lead player rather than someone who focuses primarily on supporting the song?
Well, I've always been into playing wild leads. I mean, it's definitely part of my DNA. I mean, I even played some guitar, as most Dream Theater fans know, although I don't play too much lately. But I think I'm going to get back into it in a pretty big way because I have Druskowski Guitars building me a killer 8-string guitar now to jam on. Now it's going to be fun. So, but, there's a whole other kind of expression that happens when you're playing leads. And I just think that keyboard leads can be so cool because I can use whatever sound I really, really want, especially fun to play leads, on like GeoShred, where I can be like, playing and getting feedback, and whack. I have my whammy slider, make all kinds of noise, or like. So why would I want to deny myself of that fun?
Right.
Right. So there you go.
So TAC asks, I've always felt that your respect of the other members' musical ability and intellect, as well as the overall camaraderie, may have outweighed your actual love for the music, particularly when being asked to cover stuff like Master of Puppets and Number of the Beast. Were you a little concerned about your longevity in the band at that point, in the sense of the music being as satisfying as it could be for you? What was the point in your DT career when you finally felt, damn, this is my band too?
Kind of understand that question. I thought when we decided to cover Master of Puppets and what was it called, Number of the Beast, it wasn't really stuff that I was necessarily into, although I always liked all kinds of music. And so I saw it more as an opportunity in those days to understand a little bit more of what the influences were for the other guys in the band, because like Iron Maiden was a huge influence.
Right.
So, and I never really dug into that style to, figure out what made that style kind of tick, if you will. So for me, it was interesting. It was almost like a very important step, so I could, even from a compositional point, figure out, oh, that's where that's coming from. And so next time, we're writing something, we want to kind of like tip the hat a little bit to like a Metallica or a Maiden thing. I have more information. So I wasn't like thrown off by that at all. I wasn't feeling like, oh, this is not my band because they're doing, Metallica thing. I was more interested in how am I going to go dun 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 on the keyboard, which I ended up doing like almost like in different octaves, but I would tune this octave to be the same as that. So I went. It would end up being dun 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 dun. So I would get that funny galloping sound. So I had to discover. I kind of saw it as a challenge, and how am I going to do like the second guitar parts on this keyboard? So part of being a keyboard player is in a rock band is about throwing away your ego, because sometimes I'm playing sounds that people don't recognize as a keyboard, unless I'm playing like a piano or an organ or something like that. We go, oh, the keyboard. What happens if I'm playing like a really heavy, sound that's similar to a guitar, or that's made to just kind of accentuate the guitar? Then people wouldn't even necessarily realize, they wouldn't necessarily, hear it as something that stands out as that's a keyboard. But meanwhile, it might be making the sound so much more intense. Like an Enigma machine or something like that, where the keyboard has a massive sound. And if you took it out, you would know. But nobody's going to say, oh, that's the keyboard. So, or even like orchestral things. If I'm playing French horns or, like some kind of clarinet part or even strings, they think, oh, that's an orchestra, but it might be me, you just don't know. Even when we did the Astonishing, and a lot of it was orchestra, there were parts of it that were that we left in from my like virtual instruments that I played, because some of the sounds you'd have a really hard time making in a just a natural orchestral recording. Maybe I used a sample that has 100-piece orchestra that we didn't have a 100-piece orchestra. So if I went with a 100-piece orchestra sound, the orchestrator would say, we're just going to use that because it sounds amazing. So, ego aside, there's a lot of kind of input from the keyboard player perspective, and that's just the job. But I always knew that Dream Theater was a really, good fit for me, because it uses a lot of my talents.
Jojo MLP asks, how long is your wizard beard? And is it the source of your skills?
I haven't really tended to it too much this morning because I kind of just woke up. But it is a bit of a source, the hair thing. People think, oh, somebody's got long hair. Oh, that's where the power comes from, or that, the long beard. That's where the power. Everybody's always trying to figure out where the power comes from. But I think it comes from the whole being, whatever it
Right.
is. Maybe the hair might have something to do with it, but if you cut this off, then you'd have to get the power from somewhere else. So I think there's a bit of the beard is a bit of a source of energy as well, though.
Right. So, do you have a plan for a new proggy keyboard heavy solo album anytime soon?
Yes, definitely. I've been working on some stuff. Actually, I started this wild, crazy, really long, epic, super crazy piece that almost blew up my computer. Yeah, literally. I need to get a new computer when I get home because it just decided to die. It just wouldn't play back these things. It was like, 70 tracks of
Right.
madness, and my computer was crying. So when I get home from Europe, my job is to get back into that because I have a little time. So I get back at the end of April and have May to kind of hopefully finish, the solo stuff.
And is there any plans for 11 minimum Rudess 3?
11 Miniman Rudess follow up. We would love to do that. I saw Marco not that long ago, and we were talking about the fact that those albums are so much fun. Of course, the next question is going to be, when's the Liquid Tension reunion?
Of course.
Right? And no, I've got a natural question. You're going on. I read that you're going on the cruise to the edge, and Mike Portnoy's going to be there. Will there be a reunion? Right? And to which my answer is, I didn't even think that through. That's not.
Right.
Of course, that popped into my brain, but we didn't have a chance to discuss or work anything out yet. So we'll see.
So, are there any special shows plans for Scenes from My Memory 20th anniversary next year?
No, we haven't gotten that far. We're trying to figure out how we're going to record this new album right now. That's the big. I think we've got kind of an idea, how to get into it. But when I come back in June, we're going to start doing that, and yeah, we got to start just putting ideas together and getting really into it because it's got to happen soon.
Right. So, there's a question about, since you've been in the band now almost 2 decades, but you're one of the few who have not contributed lyrically to the band. Is there any specific reason for that?
Well, a couple of reasons, I guess. One of them is that when I got into the band, the lyric writing was pretty much established, and it wasn't like an open door to just write lyrics. It wasn't like anybody was saying, Jordan, we need you to write lyrics, or please write lyrics. If anything, I got a feeling like, please just do your keyboard playing and let us do what we do. Because too many chefs in too many ways is not necessarily, a great thing. And I get that because, we don't need necessarily everybody to try to be a composer. It's not necessarily what is the best thing. So there's that reason. And the other reason is I didn't feel like a major calling to have to write lyrics, for the band. I'm a pretty, I really love the lyrics that John Petrucci writes. I think he's, a great lyricist. And when the other guys contribute, it's awesome as well. So yeah, I'm not, I don't feel really driven to have to write lyrics for the band. If I did, maybe I could, say, guys, let me write lyrics for a song, and then, we'd cross that bridge when we got there. But so far, I haven't felt the need to do that.
Daily Nader asks, would you ever sing on an album? Hearing you sing Space Oddity make me wish you did more singing here and there.
Oh, well, again, there's no real calling for me to have to sing in the Dream Theater thing, especially because my voice is a really lower range. In rock music, the range is usually much higher than my range. I mean, my range is literally like an octave lower than James LaBrie. So, again, the combination of my voice is being much lower, and also I don't have this immense desire to have to sing like in a Dream Theater record. We have a great singer, and as far as backups go, yeah, I could probably do some backups, but you know, are they really going to be written in the range that I sing? Not really. They're usually higher than what I do. So that's just the reality.
Let's see. Rush Spirit 2112 asks, "What is the one song you want to play on tour that you haven't found the right spot for yet?"
Oh no, I've always I've always wanted to do like we haven't done covers in a really long time. I think it'd be really fun to do like something off of Trick of the Tail, like with Dream
Right.
Theater, the Genesis album,
Yeah.
like Dance on a Volcano or one of these kind of songs. That'd be cool. I don't know if anybody else is into it, but I think it would be great.
I'm sure a lot of fans of Dream Theater are also Genesis fans, so I don't see
Or maybe to have everybody in the band pick, a song
right.
that they want to do, and just kind of do that. And one day we might have some fun like that.
And De Vieira asks, any news on any more It's a Jam official bootlegs?
I haven't thought about that in a while or really heard much about that. The focus has really gone on to other things. So yeah, I don't know what's going to happen with all that.
And they're also asking whether the Japanese broadcast of Images and Words and Beyond will ever be released officially.
Oh, I don't know. Good question. Just don't know the answer.
Right. So let's see. What's your long-term plans for the future? How long do you see yourself having an active musical career, like touring the globe and stuff?
Well, maybe until I'm like 98. Good question. I mean, music is my life, so it's not like I'm ever going to really be giving it up.
Of course not.
I'll be doing it on some level. I don't know how long one can keep on. Well, you look at the Rolling Stones, a group that's been rocking for so many years and just keeps on traveling. We'll see how my energy continues to hold up. Right now I feel pretty good and everything is cool. But I imagine at some point a shift towards more time in the studio, less time on the road might be something that would be advisable for longevity and for sanity.
Yeah. So let's see. How did you personally interpret your playing DT songs that were written before you joined the band?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, what I try to do is I try to understand what the parts of the music are that are important to people, and for the most part, try to follow those and just change where I felt like things could be more flexible, or where the original sound wasn't necessarily so important. And sometimes now we have sounds that are so much better on the synthesizer. Like this, if Kevin Moore, let's say, was trying to create some kind of a string sound, but it was really kind of not a great sound just because of the nature of the instruments at that point. I might add like some more real strings, to something. But other times it was just like a signature sound at the time, which I try to capture, like in Metropolis or whatever. I'm trying to, that whole thing with that particular kind of sound. I tried to nail those kind of string sounds. They're more kind of old-fashioned synth analog string sounds, which sound actually pretty cool. Or even, some of the really thinner, monophonic kind of synth sounds that people go, okay, even the beginning. It's funny hearing it on piano, but yeah, like a sound like that. I kind of try to get the original sound. Although certainly, if you were to create something today, you wouldn't necessarily use that sound because it's a little a little narrow or whatever, or old fashioned. But hey, it is the sound of what it was. So yeah, so I go into it with a great deal of respect, and then I change things to keep it interesting for me as well. I gotta have a life here,
Right.
Yeah.
And how do you approach and adapt? How did you approach and adapt to your earlier albums with Dream Theater that had a much harder metal edge and less of the progressive keyboard-driven elements of their earlier material?
Just put on my metal hat. And
Yeah, but do you have a metal hat?
yeah, sure. One of the funny things about Dream Theater is that most people from the outside, they have no idea who writes what.
Right.
They think they know that, like in the Astonishing, some of the that whole. They think, oh, Jordan wrote that, right?
Right. No.
No. The really sweet like melodies in the Astonishing, mostly John wrote.
Right.
And some of the really heavy parts I wrote. So like you never know. Like
right.
You just don't know. People just don't understand, and they don't know. So of course, in the Astonishing, because it was a bit of a polarizing album, everybody thinks, oh, Jordan, they let him do too much, because it's so sweet. Well, my friends, Jordan didn't write a lot of that stuff. Of course, I helped arrange it all and made it sound pretty when I played it or whatever. But the funny thing is that literally I'll write like a lot of the heavy things, and at times John will write some of the sweeter stuff. And we just, as composers, we write in all kinds of kind of veins, and it just is what it is. But what the funniest thing is that when we're in the studio, and I'll be like, guys, I got a great idea for a heavy riff. It'll be like, what, I don't remember actually who wrote that, but this is a good example. Like I'll play that, it'll literally sound like that, and like John Mayer will look at me and go, "What? What the hell?" Because I'm showing it. I'll have a piano sound in front of me, right? And then it'll be like, "That's not heavy." No, I'll go, "Yeah, it really is," because in my mind I'm hearing dun 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 dun, with the right sound. But it's really hard to imagine a heavy sound when you hear it. Like if I played a heavy thing, like you go, "What?" But that's better. But with a really cool grungy sound, maybe something like that would be even speak, more effectively. So I learned early on that if I want to present a heavy riff, don't play it on a music box sound.
So then Jaden Wright asks, is Dream Theater making a heavy album now?
Dream Theater's not making anything right now. No, Jordan Rudess is getting ready to go on his From Bacharach Tour through Europe. John Petrucci is playing with G3, and James is, I think, going down to South America to do some shows with some band down there, and everybody's doing their own thing. But we will be making a heavy album soon. Heavier. That's the plan. I think it'll be a little heavier. The main thing we want to do is, after getting the Astonishing out of our system and having a lot of fun with that, I think it's, again, time to kind of come back and say, okay, let's see, who are we? What is Dream Theater? Let's do something that kind of fits into what we've established here as much as possible. It's a funny thing because, some bands take the approach of every time there's a new album kind of reinventing themselves, like I guess a Radiohead could be an example when they made that big switch. That's a little dramatic, but other bands are kind of more in the space where it's like people expect, okay, this is Dream Theater, and if I want to listen to a certain kind of thing, then I listen to Dream Theater. So, they don't want to have too much of a change. They want things to fit into that pocket. And as a musician, I can understand that. As somebody who's been in a band that kind of has established a, kind of like a brand, I get that. So we have to find a balance to where we satisfy this, this desire people have to have Dream Theater fit into a certain mold, but at the same time, creatively, we have to feel, like we're moving on. And certainly for me, a lot of it has to do with the technology. I'm always exploring new instruments and new ways to make sound and bringing some of that into Dream Theater. So that helps keep it kind of like fresh and fun, and there's always something to kind of like um, bring inspiration in. And anyway, even if it's let's say it's like a traditional Dream Theater album. I mean, Dream Theater has enough of a stylistic window within it. There's so many different factors that go into even what someone might call a standard Dream Theater piece. It's not going to get boring. It's all good, you know.
So, since you were mentioning Bacharach, can you explain what the tour is about?
Yes, I start off with a little etc., and move into some nice Chopin, or even etc., and then move it slowly into other things that people know. LT, and also and a little. Kind of take people through a bit of a journey of my musical life, and literally start with Bach and move through some classical things into liquid tension and into Dream Theater and a little ground control to major tom, right? Commencing countdown engines on. So just having some fun, having the piano be, my main kind of like medium for expressing and telling my story. People who come to the show get to kind of hear what my journey has been, starting from the age of 7 and and then going to Juilliard at a very young age, at 9, and up through the time when people started to turn me on to like Genesis and Yes and King Crimson, and my whole world was kind of exploding. And Emerson, Lake and Palmer, who kind of led the way for my making a major shift when I was a little older in college, years and leaving. So so the From Bacharach Tour is really about telling my story, using music throughout the whole time period to do it, and having a great time kind of interacting with the audience.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah.
So it will be quite different from what Dream Theater fans are usually used to seeing from you.
So I recommend bring your other half out. It's for some of the females, it's probably a little bit more of a gentle experience. Sometimes the girlfriends get left out of the Dream Theater tours because part of it, although I think that females should really discover Dream Theater more because there's so many beautiful ballads and everything. However, if you've been hesitant to bring your female friend with you to shows, coming out to the From Bach to Rock concerts with them is very, very safe. I'll play some lovely ballads. Everyone will smile. The Dream Theater side of who you are will get satisfied as well because I'll play some of that. And it should be a good night for all.
Right. So I think that's all we're going to go through right now.
Oh, very nice.
Kind of lost track of all the questions, but I think I asked most of them.
You asked a lot of questions, and I hope I provided a lot of answers. So later today I'm actually leaving for Europe, and the first show is in Padua, Italy. So we start out in Italy, and then we go to Israel. Is that Israel music? I don't know. And then off to London, and then going to be in the Netherlands, right? And then I think I fly to Finland, and then from there to maybe, so I can remember the schedule, Finland, Stockholm, what am I leaving out? Denmark. Yeah, Denmark, and then Germany. I have a few shows in Germany, actually. And then finally we end up in San Sebastian, Spain, which I guess is kind of like a beach town. So hopefully there's some Dream Theater Jordan Rudess fans there. Or maybe some Dream Theater fans want to come and have a nice vacation in San Sebastian and see a show. I don't know. Anyway, so I'll stay there for a little bit of time after the show, just a couple days with my wife. We'll relax and recover from the madness of running all over the world. And then home to start, figuring out what kind of computer I need to finish my solo. Yeah. How come nobody asked, like, what do I recommend to young musicians today, given the state of the music industry? Isn't that a standard question? Like,
I don't know.
Well, for those of you who might have asked that want to know my answer, I don't know what to recommend. Everybody downloads music for free, so it's like ridiculous. And when I grew up, that was not the way. So luckily, Dream Theater has, started in a different era. So, we can make our living off of touring and merchandise and all that. But for young musicians, it's really, really, really hard.
I don't understand how they're making it go around at all.
Yeah, I actually was talking to somebody last night, was it? And I was saying that one of the ways people should probably start thinking about it is from a different point of view. Like, there are ways that music is being used more nowadays. Like, I was out in L.A. We're talking to one of the bigger music production houses, and they were saying that there's more media than ever these days. There's more companies producing television shows, and everybody needs music. So perhaps an avenue that people, need to explore is kind of like the licensing, music. If you're making nice music, that could be an avenue. There is money, there's some money there. And also in the gaming world, that's such a big deal now, and they use music as well. That's another avenue. So maybe different avenues than we're used to thinking about. We're kind of like at this, turning point where, okay, this road, there's nothing down that road anymore. You gotta go this way if you want to keep on walking. And I think maybe that's part of what has to happen.
Well, a lot of bands are also using that crowdsourcing stuff.
Yeah, but even how do you find fans? It's like,
that's difficult.
It's really hard. And how do you translate, even if you have something that's big on YouTube, how do you translate that into actually having people come out to the show? I mean, it's hard enough for established artists. My tour has actually been doing really well so far, my solo tour, but it's not without a lot of like promotion and letting people know. And, you got to keep putting things in front of people to get them out the door. Besides them wanting music for free, they're also, they can see videos online, and we have so much media that's right on our phones and on our computers to literally have people walk out the door and see music. It takes a lot.
Yeah, and everybody is touring as well, so the competition for touring is also...
That's the way you make money. I was talking to one of my friends, record company friends, the other day, and they were saying that they're starting to put out their bands like together, almost like a record company presentation of their band. So they'll take their bigger artists and add the smaller ones to the same show, so people will come out and then be exposed to, other artists. So it's got to be really creative and do things in a different way. One of the most fun things that I do these days, and it's not necessarily a money thing, although maybe one day I'll figure out how to. I think it helps business, but aside from business, let's just talk about the fun part, which is that as a musician, it's great to be able to just turn on my camera on my iPhone or whatever and just start. Hey, everybody around the world, it's Jordan, and I'm just going to jam for you right now. To have the opportunity to sit at this piano and just play and let people, share that with me is very soul kind of like satisfying. Because if I can get into a nice headspace, and share that with other people, and to see that people all around the world are kind of in it and enjoying it, that's wonderful. It's such a privilege to be able to do that. Like the other day, I put up I think it was not yesterday, but the day before, I did something on Facebook where I said live at the piano. And I just literally put the phone down and I started to improvise for like, whatever it was, a half an hour or something like that. And I had a great time. And it just was just enjoyable. People all around the world, tuning in and making comments, most of them really just nice, comments. Thanks for the music, whatever. So that's such a nice thing, Cool. Well, this has been so much fun hanging out. Sure.